Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. Um, we are from the NAACP Youth Council, and my name is Alexis Brew. I use she/her pronouns. I'm a sophomore at Foster High School and a part of the Washington Ethnic Studies Now Advisory Board. And Chris.
Hey everybody.
Sorry.
My name is Eric Anthony Souza Ponce. I use he/him pronouns. I'm a senior at Ballard High School. I'm also here today with the NAACP Youth Council, and I'm also a leader in Students and Teachers Against Racism.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anya Souza Ponce. I'm a freshman at Ballard High School. I use she/her pronouns. I'm also a member of the NAACP Youth Council, and I work with Project Lifeline. And Krista, unfortunately, cannot join us today because she's getting her second vaccine, which is very exciting. So we just want to start off with the Indigenous land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of Duwamish, Skokomish, Snohomish, Snoqualmie, and Suquamish, and other Coast Salish tribes. If you were in Seattle, we are currently on Duwamish land. So if you want to pay rent to the Duwamish people, then please go to realrentduwamish.org.
I want to start off just by sharing a couple examples of youth activists, very prominent youth activists, and examples of youth activism for educational justice. The first one is someone you probably are very familiar with, Malala Yousafzai. I hope I pronounced her name right, didn't butcher it too much, but she says, "I tell my story not because it is unique, but because it is the story of many girls." And then in Tucson, Arizona, we see an example of the youth organization Unidos as they take over a board meeting and stop the vote that would have demoted Mexican American studies to an elective class as opposed to a mandated curriculum. I don't know about y'all, but just watching that, I was getting chills.
So as we just saw, those were some examples of education or movements about education, educational liberation from obviously the States and elsewhere. Now let's talk about our group, NAACP Youth Council, and our fight in the movement for educational justice, specifically regarding racial justice in schools. So the NAACP Youth Council was founded in 2017, and it was initially called a coalition, and it was a group of students from Seattle Public Schools who were fighting for ethnic studies, and they would present at the MLK Junior annual workshops, and they would talk about the need for ethnic studies, the need for more representation in classrooms, in the teachers, people that look like them, etc. And it was just a small group of them. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the more veteran members with us today, but some of them are in these pictures, like to the far left. We have a lot of members that are still working with us today. And then we also see a lot of the teachers and adults that have supported them through the way. some of which are Rita Green and Sabrina Burr. These are our not supervisors, but like people who have led our group, who have helped us get opportunities like grants so that we're able to be funded for the work that we do, so that we're able to be compensated. They've really pushed our group to levels beyond what it was initially at. I mean, they have been with us from the very beginning, but they're really the two women who are responsible for just so much of our success. And we always want to pay, not tribute, but we just always want to acknowledge them and their amazing impact and work that they do every day. Now, before COVID, a lot of things that we would do would be in person. So we often attended school board meetings for Seattle Public Schools. And sorry, I didn't mention this before, but NYC was initially founded in Seattle, and since has expanded to, I believe, 5 different districts, like myself from Tequila. We have people from Edmonds, Mukilteo, Bellevue, and Renton, I believe. So we are expanding to be, oh, hi, John. We are expanding to be more Washington based and not just Seattle. And so, but this is one of our school board meetings that some of our members attend, or a lot of our members attended, to advocate for ethnic studies.
And is this just going to be the first speech right now that we're showing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm 15 years old and I'm a sophomore at Cleveland High School. I'm here to have you listen, comprehend, and take action from my words. Students of color have glimpses of happiness and freedom in school. When there's small opportunities to learn about our history and contributions to society, I feel moments of pride and self-value. There are not enough of these moments in our education system to make sustainable impacts on our youth of color. I have dealt with segregation in my classrooms, macro and microaggressions on a daily basis. The effect of implicit bias can be crushing to a student's spirit and passion to learn. You may not see it, but in my classes, I constantly feel like the chains my ancestors wore during slavery have been formed into the miseducation for entire generations. I'm here to demand ethnic studies K through 12 because this will benefit current and future generations to come. Now is the time. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, but now. We have been waiting far too long to see ourselves represented in the curriculum. When ethnic studies is mandated, students are engaged in their learning and attentive in class because the truth is being told. And we see ourselves and they see the possibilities they will have with their future. I want to see my friends and classmates' passion for learning to be ignited. I want to see them feel safe. When ethnic studies is fully mandated K through 12, the impact will be reached far beyond the doors of Seattle Public Schools. Listen to the words and take action.
Thank you.
So I hope that you were able to get something from her testimony. That was Mia Dabney. She's an amazing person. This is just a slide of some of the people who have supported us throughout the years. Next slide, please. So our essential question today is, how do we ensure education is equitable for all? And the theme is, or the global issue that we're addressing is education for all. Education for all can look different for a lot of different people or regions or countries, etc. But for the NAACP Youth Council, we focus on quality education, especially for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, which means that we need to drastically change the ways that the school system has been built around Eurocentric and heteronormative status quo. And so we have a list of demands, which I think John put in the chat earlier, which I can put again, in case you're curious to read through them yourself. We have a list of 9 demands, and then some of them are district specific that aren't shown here. But now we're going to be talking about these different demands and how they relate to making sure that students have quality education. Next slide, please.
So our first demand is to increase the voice of youth, especially BIPOC youth, in decision-making at all levels of public education. Voices of students of color should be included in the decision-making at all levels without administration laying their responsibility and the labor on BIPOC students. To counter this, we demand the districts do the following with efforts to include and center BIPOC youth. And I'm just going to mention a few of these bullet points, but there's a whole list and you can see them in the chat. To provide more platforms for meaningful youth input, not last minute feedback, which feels like box checking. Establish student representation on the hiring committees at all levels, including committees, buildings, and district. Ensure youth representation on superintendent search and interview committee, and compensating youth labor with money and or credit. And there's many more bullet points for this one specifically, but those are just a few major ones.
All right, our next demand is to mandate thorough and frequent staff racial equity trainings. I'm gonna give y'all a little story to back this one up. I go to Ballard High School, right? I'm a senior at Ballard High School, so I got like 3 more weeks there right now. Ballard High School in Seattle, Washington is 75% white, it's overwhelmingly white, and the staff is almost entirely white. So earlier this year, I had a white English teacher who conducted an entire unit around the premise that Black and brown people are like Frankenstein's monster. Let me say that again. She conducted an entire unit of curriculum around the idea that Black and brown people are like Frankenstein's monster. She got all of these white kids to be saying that, oh, you know, they don't have any identity. They resort to drugs and violence. They, you know, animalizing us as people, comparing us to this subhuman monster made from corpses with the master and the creator. And then when I raised my concerns as one of the only students of color in the entire class, I was the only one to raise my concerns. And then instead of any action being taken against the teacher, I was punished. I was expelled from the class by the principal himself. This is what it looks like when we don't have mandated, thorough, and frequent staff racial equity trainings. Teachers are allowed to do this. They're encouraged to do this. They're allowed to get away with this. They get the students to replicate these racist behaviors, and it's backed by the administration. This is why we need to mandate thorough and frequent staff racial equity trainings.
Our next demand is to increase access to opportunities in mental health services and financial literacy. Many youth of privilege, disproportionately white, have access to connections that lead to opportunities. Not all students have these connections, so to be equitable, we must prioritize bringing such opportunities to BIPOC youth. Consequentially, districts in Washington must undertake the following measures. Hire BIPOC counselors and therapists and increase student access to them. Provide consistent, continuous, and comprehensive training for all therapists and counselors on Black mental health. Provide social, emotional, and mental health studies for all students K through 12 taught in a culturally responsive way. And providing more information on opportunities available like internships and summer programs, and ensure that students have access to receive opportunity information in a timely manner. Those are just a few examples again, but there's a whole list of them.
So I'm gonna start off by letting y'all know, many believe that racial segregation is a thing of the past, that it doesn't happen anymore, that was done with the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Racial segregation is alive and well, and it is especially alive and well in this city. Gentrification and redlining and all of that stuff plays into it. Within our own education system, there are many structures that uphold racial segregation. One of those structures is the highly capable cohort program. This is a program for advanced students, really privileged students, just to separate them and give them more opportunities and resources than students of color. And it is overwhelmingly white kids that are getting into this, and we know that that's wrong because white kids are not inherently smarter or more talented than students of color. So we need to abolish these structures that uphold this racial hierarchy within our school system. Racial justice and environmental justice are the same thing, and that's a fact. You cannot have one without the other. From a small scale in our own cities to worldwide in different countries, this is consistent. We see in the United States, Black and brown neighborhoods are the ones that suffer most from pollution. We see factories and processing plants being built in Black and brown neighborhoods, which increases health risks for Black and brown people, increasing medical disparities. We see in the global South, those are the countries that have the most Black and brown people. Those are the countries that produce the lowest carbon emission rates, but suffer the greatest from global climate change. So climate justice is racial justice, and racial justice is climate justice. And we need to be educating about climate justice so that way we can address racial disparities.
Our next demand and our next few demands relate to the organization Black Lives Matter at school. And so this demand says support Black Lives Matter at school actions, including the New Year of Purpose. And where this comes from is in 2016, the organization Black Lives Matter at School was founded in Seattle Public Schools. And there was a whole movement and uprising and advocacy for Black Lives Matter at School, which you can read more about in an article that I'll put in the chat in a few minutes. But this has always been one of our demands because Black Lives Matter at school, Black Lives Matter everywhere, and the Black Lives Matter at School organization has has demands that overlap with ours. And they just implemented a new year of purpose where it's not just a week, it's not just a month where we celebrate Black lives, it's every month, every day. So yeah. And then speaking of the overlap, one of Black Lives Matter at Schools demands is to end zero tolerance policies and fund counselors, not cops. And our demand is to incorporate restorative justice practices in police-free schools instead of outdated discipline practices that are quite problematic. Schools should not be a place where students are criminalized, and that's often that reality that we see day in and day out, especially for our Black and Brown students. We see the school to prison pipeline being perpetuated every single day. And so we need restorative practices along with trainings, along with a whole bunch of other things that will supplement and support restorative practices. And then, do you want me to speak on it? All right.
I can go ahead. So we go to our classes, in all of our classes, we go to English class and we read literature, and the literature that we read is white people literature. It's written by white authors for white people. We go to our history class and we learn history, and the history that we learn is a history of white people. I remember in my world history class, we did a unit about the ancient Greek people, we did a unit about the ancient Romans, and then we did one unit that was combined Mesopotamians and Aztecs and Egyptians. And that doesn't make any kind of sense because those civilizations are completely different. The point is, nowhere in the curriculum do we see ourselves unless it is due to our relationship with white people. And usually that is a bad relationship. We learn about the indigenous peoples of what is today referred to as the Americas because of a traumatic relationship, a genocide caused by white supremacy. We learn about the only elements of Black history that we are taught in school is because of a traumatic relationship with whiteness. So ethnic studies is not about the exclusion of white people, but rather the inclusion of Black and Brown people, learning about ourselves more than just because of our relationship with this traumatic relationship with whiteness.
And lastly, I'm pretty sure, hire and retain more Black, Indigenous people of color as educators. All of the things that you've heard from Eric Anthony and us and our other demands have to do with a lot of different things. But one of the main things that we see is that our BIPOC teachers and educators and staff are pushed out, meaning that their voices aren't being heard. They aren't being represented to BIPOC students. And that's has a whole slew of other repercussions. And when we actually look at the facts, when you have more excuse me, when you have more BIPOC educators and representation, it doesn't only impact and benefit BIPOC students, but white students as well. You see better engagement, you see better community and family relationships, you see better graduation rates, you see better testing scores. I go to a district, or I'm in a district that is very, very diverse in student population, but I, as a Black person, have never had a Black teacher, and that phenomenon is something we see a lot. I'm not sure about the exact percentages, that would be Eric Anthony, but it doesn't matter whether your school is 100% Black and Brown or people of color, you will always see more white teachers because they dominate the teaching force, and it's because Black teachers and other people of color are not supported, they are pushed out. There's, you can say all these things that you want to do regarding racial justice, but if you're not even doing the bare minimum of hiring people of color, then all the other stuff doesn't really matter. And also, sorry, one more thing. We talk about hiring, but it's also about the retention, because you can hire as many people as you want. If you're not retaining them, if you're not changing the culture, if you're not doing work to make sure that they are staying, then it also doesn't matter. So that concludes our demands. And we just have our little impact statement at the beginning, but NYC, which is NAACP Youth Council, has served students across the state from 2017. We present at panels, at conferences, school board meetings. Some of the things that some of those we listed at the bottom, all with the goal of spreading our message, our demands, and hopefully to affect change in school systems, ensuring that BIPOC students across the state feel safe and supported in their schools as they should. So I will, next slide. Pass it to Eric Anthony.
So anytime that a system of inequity is being challenged and that challenge does not serve those benefited from that system of inequity, there's going to be pushback in one way or another. And we're no stranger to our share of pushback. This comes from the school systems. This comes from, parents who want to uphold the system that benefits the privileged kids. So we definitely do get a lot of pushback. But we also have our fair share of successes as well.
Yes, sorry, I was trying to put this in the chat. I just put an article about Black Lives Matter at school, like I said I would earlier. Anyway, so our successes, you obviously just heard all of our demands, and some of our demands have been met or been, we've made strides with them. The first, we see Seattle Public Schools passed the Black Lives Matter resolution in 2018 in support of their teachers celebrating and talking about Black Lives Matter at school. Seattle Public Schools created an ethnic studies resolution in 2017, but we are still definitely pushing for ethnic studies because it is nowhere near where it should be. I think she's still the superintendent, Denise Juneau. She resigned as superintendent of Seattle Public Schools, and one of our demands used to be that she needed to be removed as superintendent because of many different reasons, but she was highly problematic and not for the liberation of BIPOC students or teachers or anyone. And so there was a lot of advocacy for her to be removed and have her contract not renewed. And after we published an article, she was resigning like a day or two later, not saying with all us, but that was definitely a success. And then lastly, which I view as so great because we were really there from the very beginning, the Seattle Public Schools School Board passed policy 1250, allowing student representation on the school board in 2021. So one of our members, or a few of our members, brought the idea of having students on the school board, and so we planned meetings with each of the school board members. We talked about what we wanted, why we wanted it, why it was important, and then we drafted the policy and all of from the very beginning to the policy finally being passed. And so there will be student representation on the school board, which is definitely very amazing. So that concludes our presentation piece. Now we really want to hear from you all. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. There's 19 people and we have 20 something minutes. We'll just do like five people in breakout rooms to talk about those questions, which I didn't get a chance to read, but I'll put them in the chat. But really just wanting to hear your perspectives on what stood out, what resonated with you, and some of the things that maybe align with your school district. And we just want to hear about like change. Yes, change needs to happen in all districts, but it can look different for many different people, and people have different perspectives on that. So Anya, if you could please make those breakout rooms. And then our questions, so A, just simple, which demands resonated with you? We know that there was a lot, so feel free to look back at that document that's in the chat. They'll put one more time. And why did it resonate with you? And then our second question, what would you change about the school system? Can you write it in the chat? Yes, for sure. What would you change about the school system if you had a magic wand? Or what's just something that, maybe not the whole school system, but really just what change do you want to see in school? And then, yeah, we'll regroup after that. I'm putting those in the chat right now. Okay, is everyone back? Cool. So I know that we had a great conversation in our breakout room. So I hope that everyone else did too. And it probably wasn't enough time, but we just wanted to come back to the main room before our workshop ends to debrief about the discussion. And so everyone can hear some of the ideas that were shared and then also share some other stuff at the end. So does anyone feel compelled to just share what they talked about, something that stood out to them, etc.?
I can share something that we talked about. Something that Danielle brought up, which I really liked, was about how education doesn't really work for us, right? We sit in the class, we watch a teacher talk, and then we have to answer some questions. It's not really something that is interesting, and it has very big repercussions, negative repercussions if we don't do well with that. So really when education works for the students, then the students can do much better. And when we look at how this hurts the students, it's going to be hurting the students of color much more because of the pre-existing disparities that are already hurting us.
I know in mine, after we talked about the demands, we talked about different support systems for teachers of color and like kind of about the demand about hiring or training BIPOC educators. And we talked about that a little bit, and also about why a lot of the times like ASB, for example, in school isn't necessarily like the best way to actually represent the student body.
In my breakout room, we spoke about the lack of diversity at my school. And we also talked about using Black Lives Matter as a trend, because people, when it started becoming really like, it started making an impact, people felt pushed to talk about this issue, even if they didn't have enough knowledge about it or really supported it. And we also talked about the importance of having BIPOC staff members at our school and in the student body.
Also, feel free to utilize the chat. Even if you don't want to give your whole answer, maybe in the chat we could put which demand we talked about or which one stood out to us or we resonated with us the most. Because I'm curious. Okay. I want to also still, okay, thank you. In the chat, someone put increased voice of youth. I want to give space and make sure that I'm not overstepping, want to give time. Okay, I'm gonna put something in the chat. This is a form that we ask all of our, whenever we do panels or anything, our participants to fill out for our group, the NAACP Youth Council, just telling us how we did. It's really short. It's like 2 questions and they're multiple choice, I think. Yeah, so this just helps us get feedback and et cetera, et cetera. So if you could fill that out, that would be great, please. And then Anya, could you share your screen?
Yeah, one moment, Shine.
Okay. Oh, John, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just the form that you had is from a different workshop. So the one I put in is the second one's the one to do.
Okay, thank you. And then I know someone in our next slide. In our breakout room asked how they can be involved in NYC, and I can't remember how you phrased it. But and I'm also not sure. Anyway, so obviously if you want to stay like active or up to date with what's going on, we have social medias, and then the email at the bottom is John, that guy that started talking. He's our youth coordinator who like coordinates everything for us. So if you want to like be further involved or anything really, just knowing what we're doing, he would be the person to email, john.t.greenberg@gmail.com, and I can also put in the chat so that you can copy and paste it. So like whatever it would be, joining or just visiting, having us come to another panel or workshop or anything, that's who you would contact. And I hope that that answers your question. I can't remember who asked it, but yeah.
Just want to say thank you so much for your powerful work. It is so important, and I have been involved in racial equity in my district, and it's hard. It's hard to get through. It's hard for students. I have been part of times where our students were in tears and trying to demand curriculum. And what you have presented is just powerful, especially that in which you request not only curriculum, but also mental health. And Black and Brown are gonna need it as they return to the classroom, especially after our COVID-19 experience. There's gonna be a lot of need for mental health support. Thank you so much. You're doing a wonderful work.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, well, we have 2 more minutes until the next portion of our day. Does anyone else want to say anything? Have any closing thoughts, questions?
I think in one of the emails, someone said we were going to take like a picture or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know who's taking that picture. I think they said someone from WAGIN. Let's see.
Someone just want to take a screenshot just in case.
Yeah, I just don't know who's. Oh, did you say? What'd you say?
Oh, I said if one of us could take a screenshot just in case.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
John says he can do it.
Okay. Yeah. So